We'll now talk about the development of an ESG reporting framework where we can leverage international frameworks in the tech sector to increase standardized reporting. To discuss in the panel, I will call upon Saad Rajput to come on stage as the panel moderator. Saad Rajput is Senior Officer Planning, Monitoring and Gender Finance at UN Women. Next, I will call upon Anam Aftab, who is the Program Coordinator for Women, Peace and Security at UN Women, to come on stage as panelist. Anam is a social development professional with vast experience working with international NGOs, policy think tanks, and the corporate sector. I will also request Nadia Ishtiaq to come on stage for the discussion. Nadia is MD Investment Banking Head and Head of Fem Finance Initiative at K-Trade. We also have Memosh Khan with us, who is the CEO of PICG and an advocate of women participation in the corporate sector. I invite him to join the discussion. I also invite Ibad Ahmed, Director of Food Panda, to come on stage and join the panel. Over to you, Saad.
Thank you, Raida, and a very good morning and Assalamu alaikum to everyone who's present here, and a very happy Women's Day to all of you. I'll just give you a brief overview of what the next 20 to 30 minutes are going to look like. As you know, and as Raida rightly mentioned, that ESG principles are what companies the world over are now trying to follow and trying to endorse. And gender equality and women's empowerment is a common thread that runs through the ESG framework in each of the pillars of the E, S, and G. So, for example, in the environment, we see that women often face asymmetric effects of climate disasters. We saw that in the floods that Pakistan had in Q3 and Q4 last year. In the social pillar, we see that there are issues such as labor rights and access to products and services, and how sometimes women are again left out. And finally, governance, where we see internal corporate governance issues such as gender pay, gender parity, and issues of that nature. So ESG can therefore be an enabler for the gender equality and women empowerment agenda. And in Pakistan, the SCCP came up with this roadmap for ESG adoption last year. And that's a very important step, not just towards the fulfillment of international obligations for Pakistan, but also towards influencing firm behavior towards adoption of these principles. And a very crucial issue when we talk about ESG adoption is the issue of reporting. As long as there's standardized reporting, only then can firms be held accountable and also can measure their progress. And we have certain international frameworks that are already present, such as the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, and others such as the Women Empowerment Principles that UN Women leads. So today we're going to talk about how we can leverage these international frameworks to not just catalyze progress towards ESG and towards a reporting framework, but also towards the gender equality and women's empowerment agenda. I have today with me Mr. Ibad Ahmed, Director of Food Panda, leader from the tech sector, CEO of PICG, Mr. Memosh, Ms. Nadia Ishtiaq, she's Managing Director for K-Trade Securities, and my colleague from UN Women, Anam Aftab, Program Officer, UN Women. I'd like to start the discussion from Anam. Anam, can you tell us about the women empowerment principles and how companies and firms can sort of gain from adherence to these principles, and how these principles can also act towards be a catalyze progress towards development of a standardized framework for ESG.
Thank you, Saad, for the question, and Assalamu alaikum, and a very happy International Women's Day to everybody. I think before I address your question, I just wanted to take this opportunity to explain what the women empowerment principles are. So basically, these are, I would say, guiding principles. They're flexible and they're voluntary for private sector organizations to kind of advance gender equality, not only in their workspace, but also in the marketplace that they work and in the communities they operate in. And these 7 principles are, they're related to, let's say, leadership, how many women are present in the leadership positions. And I think Farzine's presentation was a snapshot of how that can be reported. Then, what kind of, are men and women in the organization, free from any form of discrimination. What does the well-being of your employees look like? It could be how are you advocating in your communities for gender equality? And the last principle, that I think is crucial and also relates to ESG is, monitoring and reporting. This is where the, I would say, accountability and transparency of private sector organizations comes in. So within these principles, WEPS has some indicators. And private sector organizations can, voluntarily report on these indicators. And since gender is cross-cutting across the ESG, the environment, the social, and the governance, companies can show progress. So when you sign up, and we have, UN Women has signed up 100 Pakistani companies, who are signatories to the WEPS. So these WEPs basically allow them to first kind of do a self-reflection, do a baseline of where they are at in terms of gender advancement within the organization, as I said, in the market space also, and also in communities, and then kind of show that progress. So perhaps the few companies that we saw, highlighted in the presentation previously, if they are to sign up to WEPS, they can show, okay, we started off with 0 in 2022, but, and that was just at, let's say, at the director level. But, across the 3 spaces that WEPS apply to, what is the progress that they have seen? And I think that directly then contributes to the ESG. One of the challenges with ESG is, as you said, is, it doesn't have standardized reporting, a framework. And I think WEPS is one of those tools that would allow the companies to, compare themselves globally, because these principles are established based on global human rights and labor laws. So I think that it's a great tool to kind of, propagate gender advancement in the private sector.
Thank you, Anam, for that very comprehensive overview of the WEPS program. I'll come to one of our very latest signatories to the WEPS program, Food Panda, who is a very important tech sector partner for UN Women. And we signed WEPS with Food Panda, I think, in 2022. So, Ibad, I'd like to know from you how the WEPS has sort of, advanced the women empowerment agenda within Food Panda, not just internally, but also externally in terms of your supply chains and all. How has that improved not just your progress towards the right thing to do, but also the business case for women's empowerment within the tech sector?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Going back to your point, Saad, I'll just say there are 3 kind of unsaid principles within the Food Panda leadership teams that started to emerge, I would say probably a little more as of last year. And those 3 principles were, we have not nearly done enough, and this needs to change. And we need to start to get on with the program, and we need to be on way to the journey. So kahin se to shuru karna hai. So that was one of the themes here. We see, mashallah, we have a lot of female representation at managerial roles, even at senior manager, and mashallah, alhamdulillah, now at business unit head roles. But for example, at the directorial level, we don't have that as yet. And we need to do something about it, and how we're going to do that. The second one was, and which is a bit more related to your question, is this needs to be done because there is no other alternative. So if you really look at it, you're working, you're existing in a society which has a certain composition. And if we are a consumer business and we truly believe that we are very close to the hearts of consumers and we understand, then we have to have that representation in our thought, representation in how we design UI UX, how we design consumer experiences, how we understand how consumers and shoppers buy. Right. If we do not have that representation, then we will be sitting in some kind of glass, or ivory tower and totally disconnected from reality. And this is why we need to start doing that. And today I'm very happy to say that Alhamdulillah, over the last year, we have made great progress on having women managers and leaders in roles which are typically underrepresented. So in supply chain, in operations, we have women store managers. I'm very proud of one of them, Ilsa, who's recently gone away for personal reasons, but she was a cluster lead. So 6 male store managers were reporting into her, and she was responsible for a full division, for example. In terms of food quality and safety, now, one of the biggest deterrents to online purchases is how do you pick and choose fruits, vegetables, and meat. This is we still see that this is one of the biggest detractors from online grocery shopping or adoption. And we said that if we do not understand this from a psychological perspective, how do you touch and feel? What does it look like? Things like that, and also understand concerns around food quality and safety, we would not thrive and do well. So Alhamdulillah, the leader of that division is a lady, Aksa, and she was, mashallah, one of only 12 Pakistanis out of a pool of a few hundred who was chosen to participate in the FIFA World Cup as an inspector. And it's a beautiful story because obviously what that meant was that she asked the organization for taking some time off, which was around 40 days or so. So it wasn't just about us. I think the key enabler here, I feel personally, was a spouse. If the spouse would not have allowed in the first place, आपका manager जितना भी आपको facilitate करना चाहे, that's not going to happen. Right. So with that kind of emphasis, she's going there. She's one of only 12 Pakistanis inspecting the foods, being served not just in the stadia but also to the teams at the back, and her interaction with the likes of Messi and whatnot. I mean, it was very exciting. But other than that, the fact that we all said that this is important, that she plugs herself out, and mashallah, now that she's back, she understands international food quality principles way better than she did before, because obviously the standards, probably some of them that we had here locally, they were not as stringent as were being conducted at the FIFA World Cup. So these are small success stories, but just going back to your point that there has to be women representation in underrepresented areas. ये थोड़ा सा stereotypical हो जाता है कि human resources, marketing, etc., and we need to break that and get out of that. The last leadership principle which has governed some of the movement is it's in general good for business. And we need to start understanding this, that if we don't wrap our heads around this from a purely selfish perspective, forget the moral obligation, forget that it is incumbent that we do this. From a pure selfish business lens, this is what makes sense. आज हमारे पास 5,000 home chefs हैं. 76% of them are females. Like, if I don't say that this is an important contribution, then I don't know what else can help emphasize that. Similarly, we have something which we call the marketing calendar. So ever since we started the grocery business about 2.5 years ago, when we started Panda Mart, and we were part of that pioneering team, the suppliers that we work with, for them, marketing is no longer about marketing. It is also about corporate social responsibility, how we can do joint activities under some kind of CSR calendar, established framework. So some of the things that we have started doing is we have mapped a full year calendar of activities to each supplier, what is most important to them from a shared values perspective. So for example, there would be one SDG which is more relevant to, say, for example, a Coke. And then to Pepsi Cola, it's something else. To somebody else, it's something else. And on Break the Bias, we have had the greatest support from Procter & Gamble. What we are working with them towards is something a bit more, something a bit larger, whereby we are trying to induct and recruit more and more female riders. So the number is not that good right now. We have about 25 to 30,000 riders listed, out of which at any one point around 10 to 15,000 are active, but only 50 of them are female riders. So what we are working on is with the program with P&G to increase the number of female riders, increase the number of warehouse or store managers and the staff underneath them to manage our grocery business. So all I'm saying is the third principle is particularly very close to my heart. कि अगर आपको और कुछ नहीं समझ में आती, and I have to give one nugget or takeaway, it is actually good for business. So embrace it just for the sake of it. Yeah.
True. No, very rightly pointed out. And there's a Deloitte study that shows that more diverse workforces, companies with a more diverse workforce, have about 22% more profits and more productivity. So definitely, it's good for business, and it's heartening to see the progress that women have made at Food Panda and how you prioritize that. I'm going to gravitate back to ESG with Memosh. So Memosh, at PICG, being the Institute of Corporate Governance, what do you see are some of the key gaps that there exist right now in Pakistan uh, towards the development of a standardized framework for ESG? And how do you think can international frameworks such as the WEPs, the GRI, how can these be leveraged for progress towards that?
So thanks. Basically, I'll come to the standardized reporting in a second, but I'll just pick up from what my colleague here was saying. I think if you want to establish ESG ratings in any market, now of course Pakistan, the first step is, because I come from a business background, a corporate background, the first step is to convince businesses that it's good for business. There is a business case for this. Unless we do that, homework, forget about reporting. Reporting is step 4. You know, I know we are here in the PSX, reporting is the topic, but I also talk to my PSX colleagues and I tell them, let's do the homework for us. We need to get to point A where we can convince businesses that it's good for business. Because if they're not convinced about that, then it's going to be greenwashing or whatever you want them to do. So let's get to it step by step. And also, I mean, if you look at major reportings, they all talk about governance being a key topic when you want to get to ESG. So, how many of our board members, those 500 odd companies and the board members, how many of them are ESG competent? How many of them have ESG know-how? Yeah. Unless you get those sort of numbers going, you're not going to get it from their hearts into getting to report and talk about ESG. So those are some of the fundamental things we have to do first before we get to reporting. But I'll come to reporting. So in terms of reporting, I think there's good news. Globally, there is this ISSB standards coming out next year, which are going to lay the ground for, because there is confusion worldwide in terms of how do we go about it. Pakistan, if we are not standardized, it's no worries. I mean, we've done a survey under the PSX PICG partnership of a lot of corporates, and we learned that most of them are following GRI and SASB. And last week, we were in a dialogue with the GRI global CEO and also the SASB, founding members to understand how reporting will evolve next year. So the good news is that GRI is going to be a key component of the global standard, and SASB is going to be also referenced to, especially when it comes to general reporting on ESG. So all those companies that are following GRI in Pakistan, and there are quite a few that are doing it, so they're encouraged to continue doing that. So that's good news. It's not going to be a dramatic shift to what people are already doing. So I think the companies that are following ESG reporting of sorts in Pakistan, they have to continue as they are. The other 500 odd who are not doing anything, we need to get them to step 1, step 2, step 3, and then this whole thing will, I think, flow through. That's my perspective.
Thanks, Memosh, for those very insightful remarks. I'll move on to Nadia Ishtiyaq. So Nadia, given your area of expertise, we see how ESG links broadly to the impact investing space. And we've seen also there's some sort of momentum in Pakistan with regards to that. There are gender bond guidelines that were issued by the SECP, green bond guidelines, but there was no uptake by private companies or for sovereign bonds, and understandably so. But how do you see the impact investing space develop in Pakistan, and how do you see the ESG reporting, if that increases? How do you see that would sort of catalyze progress towards a well-developed impact investing market in Pakistan?
So, thank you. First of all, I would like to say that it's a pleasure sharing space with such seasoned professionals, especially Dr. Shamshad Akhtar. So before we discuss the need and benefits of a standardized ESG framework, and I fully agree with Mr. Memosh, the points that he has raised, it is actually important for companies to understand the concept and the benefits that it will bring to their companies. Uh, um, the thing is that, the total impact investment globally currently stands at around $16 trillion, which is expected to grow to $30 trillion by 2030, which is obviously skewed towards European and American markets, but it is geographically dispersed. And the Southeast Asian countries are now gearing up with ESG compliance. And the fact is that, companies have realized that they can no longer use ESG as a marketing tool. This is no longer good to have disclosure strategy. It is actually important because stakeholders have now actually changed the lens through which they used to evaluate the performance of different companies. So profitability is not the sole criteria that investors are looking at. In fact, sustainable long-term growth is a key factor in making investment decisions. I'm glad that, our government and regulatory bodies are well aware of the importance and the value potential of ESG compliance, and that is why, like you've mentioned, that, efforts are underway in terms of the guidelines and the roadmap. So the plan is there. What I feel is that the compliance to this framework needs to be mandatory. Otherwise, we're not going to get the results, right? If we really want to take the full benefit of, getting on the radar of investors, we need to make it mandatory. So yes, a standardized system absolutely, would benefit as it sets out a benchmark, a base criteria for the companies to evaluate the performance of those companies, and this is what investors are looking for. Compliance with such frameworks actually provides comfort with the quality of information that the company produces and authenticity of report. So yes, it is definitely important.
Thanks, Nadia, and very happy to see you say that there should be mandatory reporting. Mimosh, I'll come back to you on that. Do you think there's the ecosystem as it exists right now? Do you think it's conducive for mandatory reporting? You said there's a lot of homework that needs to be done, but there are companies who are doing pretty well still. Do you think and how? I mean, what PICG is doing is wonderful, but could you also tell us about how PICG aims, because this is going to be a long-term thing, how PICG aims to fill that capacity gap that we always hear about?
So, in terms of capacity, I mean, let me just quickly share this point that since we're talking on the Women's Day, we are in the month of March, we have just announced a 30% discount to all women who want to register for the director certification. So this will be effective for all who register in March. So on behalf of PSX, I can relay this message. The other bit is, yes, on capacity building for ESG, we are this is in our domain and we're taking it very seriously. I'm also happy to announce that we are just about to, let's say in a few days, we'll be announcing a capacity building program for boards and C-suite executives on ESG. Mm-hmm. So it will be a proper certification on ESG for boards. So that will be, as I said, a critical step to get the board members and the C-suite to think about how this is good for business. So that's something that we are rolling out. And we are also engaged with sector-specific, sector-specific areas where we can actually train, let's say, financial institutions on ESG and other sectors, because there are certain variations in terms of how sectors can bring in ESG into their fold. So then there'll be some variations as well that we are working on. So I think capacity building is absolutely important, but as it happens, there are other ecosystem players who have to play their part, and the management and the executives who have to roll it out. There's a massive work to be done in terms of their capability development and how to action ESG and how to report ESG. So that's a bigger play area, and I think everybody will have to come on board, making it part of business schools education, making it part of other executive education part. Otherwise, I think if we just fill the board level capacity, that's not going to be enough. We'll have to actually roll it down all the way to make things happen. And I think there is a lot of enthusiasm with the younger management in learning it. So we host webinars, we host these topics on ESG, and the amount of participation we get from younger executives, that shows us that there's a lot of enthusiasm amongst this group to learn about ESG. And I think we also look forward to developing programs for this area as well in due time, where we can do technical training on ESG as well. That will be the big one, I think. So yeah.
Thanks, Mamosh. Ibad, just some insights from you, since you're a technology sector leader. How do you see the technology sector in general in Pakistan moving towards, socially responsible business practices, ESG, and related frameworks? How do you see the technology sector in general in Pakistan?
So we're pretty new to measurement and reporting. So ये तो मतलब has to go without saying कि we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But in terms of commitment to change, I think I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but we are all prisoners of context, whether we like it or not. I think Pakistan is going through a very rough patch and time, and regardless of what technology might be doing, it is either disrupting or it is enabling some kind of physical business. If you really look at it, actually, other than services, if you especially look at products, products need to get from point A to point B. That means that there is a last mile logistics element involved, there is warehousing involved, there is storage and fulfillment involved. And in all those places, you have to unleash creativity amidst these constraining times. And what we feel is that the best creativity comes out amidst constraint. We were very happy because there was an internal milestone that we celebrated in December, that as a e-groceries platform, we are one of the 3 companies only, and in fact, I'm just talking about specifically Food Panda, Panda Mart, Pakistan right now, who is achieving a certain threshold of profitability amidst everyone questioning quick commerce, whether this makes sense or not. And we just celebrated that. And in January, we got to know that fuel prices are changing again, right? So all I'm saying is you have to be very adaptable, because no matter what you do, you're still not ready for what might follow in the times that we have. So the creativity that we are trying to unleash is how can we reduce our dependence on the grid? Very, very clearly. It does a couple of things at the same time. Obviously, it reduces consumption, it reduces dependence on the grid, but it is also good in terms of the rising electricity prices that we are seeing in terms of the commercial tariff. It's becoming more and more difficult to sustain an on-ground assets operation otherwise. The same thing applies to other things. So, for example, we started thinking more about those things that we perhaps did not. So that kind of creative optimization has come in as a result of the tough times that you face. So when the lights went out previously, we were resorting to the generator or the genset, and now we are saying, no, I think there's a better way of doing this. We can perhaps do it through a network of UPSs and be more prudent around consumption itself. We were perhaps not as prudent around consumptions, the number of chillers and freezers inside, but obviously now that we started doing that, it's doing 2 things together. It is reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, and as per the carbon footprint standards that we want to achieve as an organization, reporting into a company like Delivery Hero. So for those of you who don't know, Food Panda is 100% wholly owned by Delivery Hero, which is a German-based company operating in 70 countries, but listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. So they have certain reporting standards that all their subsidiaries need to abide by. So now we're trying to hit 2 birds with 1 stone, do what is right for us from a profitability standpoint and a sustainability standpoint, and at the same time, make sure that these kinds of emissions, etc., they stay in control as well. I mean, Alhamdulillah, आज हम यहाँ पे सारे बैठे हुए हैं. We might not want to accept it, but we are mostly privileged. Regardless of whoever is sitting here, if we have a problem admitting that we are part of a certain socio-economic strata, I don't think that would be fair. मुल्क मुतहम्मिल नहीं हो सकता. So we all have to think कि ESG किस तरीके से, अब चाहे वो it is electricity consumption, it is talking about women empowerment and their participation in the workforce. I don't see that over the next 2 to 3 years people can afford not to have dual career couples. I personally cannot envision that. It's going to get extremely difficult, and having a dual career couple inside the household is what's going to keep the chula burning, as they say. So I think what I was just alluding to is um, ESG is important. I think we are not that good on the measurement side, but to summarize, we're definitely going there. Not only because we want to do it, but because the times are pushing us in that direction.
No, definitely, definitely. Very, very good and very, very thoughtful comments. I'll just, in the interest of time, I'm going to just run through the panel one last time. If every one of you can, in 30 seconds, give a key recommendation or a key action point that you could take within your organizations, or a key recommendation that others could take, so that we can sort of, take this conversation forward in the next months and years. I'll start with Anam.
Just quickly as a recommendation, I think my colleagues here spoke about not just the ESG frameworks, but other frameworks that different companies could report to. I'd just like to, speaking from the lens of the women empowerment principles, yes, we have 100 signatories globally. There are around 7,000. I think what these frameworks and what these principles and indicators allow companies, private sector companies to do is adopt a very holistic approach, right? So it's great, and we are glad. I'm really glad to have Food Panda here on the panel because they, even when they say that yes, measuring and reporting is a challenge, but I can already see that they've applied that lens, where they're looking at gender across all the different verticals and business sectors that they're working in, not just the supply chain, but internally in their workforce also. Or they're thinking about the environmental and the social case of why you need more gender parity. I, as a recommendation and as a commitment, I would like to see more Pakistani companies adopt WEPs. I think it's a great tool, to kind of self-reflect. And we, UN Women, is very willing and open to support you in developing those guidelines, in rolling out those assessment tools so that companies are better able to understand the business case of why they need to put gender as a as a forefront of how they would make their business more profitable, but also take them at par with global companies. Thank you.
Thanks, Anam. Nadia.
Well, like I said, that educating the corporates is extremely important in making them understand the benefits that ESG will bring. So, as a certified PICG director, it is my responsibility, to incorporate international best practices and business re-engineering and such concepts in the company's culture. Apart from this, as an investment banker, it is our responsibility and part of our advisory assignments to assess the performance of different businesses and advise them on, renewable energy and how to reduce cost and everything. So I feel that, it is a great platform because then you can tap a couple of investors and, enhance your reach in getting the point across and making them understand. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Nadia. Memosh.
Yeah, so 30 seconds. I would just say ESG is coming for sure. So there's no stopping. But the message to businesses is once again, don't wait for the regulators to ask you to do it. Start the journey now. It's good for business. It's good for your business risks and opportunities. It's nothing but that. If you want to protect your business, ESG is the way to go. If you want to build on opportunities, ESG is the way to go. Just look at it from that lens and go for it. The regulation can come and follow later. It will be much easier for you to go with it, but it's good for your business. So that's my message.
Thanks. God.
I'll just say कि कोई भी अच्छा काम अकेले नहीं हो सकता. If you really want to accomplish something great, then you can only accomplish it as a team together. Women supporting women, men, if they are in leadership positions, being good mentors, and then organizations and entities partnering together. I mean, I can safely commit that one of the things for this year for Food Panda is the UN SDGs calendar, and not just having a marketing calendar with some of the top CPG companies in Pakistan, but also having a CSR agenda-based sustainability calendar, where we will have events where both parties, the CPG as well as us, are going to chip in one way or another based on shared values. So I think एज अ टीम हम जो अकॉम्प्लिश कर सकते हैं हम कभी भी अकेले नहीं कर सकेंगे. सो इट्स ऑल अबाउट पार्टनरिंग एंड सपोर्टिंग बिकॉज एज एन इंडिविजुअल यू कैन ओनली डू एज मच.
Perfect. Thank you, Ibad, Memosh, Nadia, Anam. And I think the message here is clear. Like Memosh said, ESG is coming, and it's not just it's not just an altruistic intention. It is good for business, and it is a development imperative. So as soon as companies get onto that bandwagon, the better it is. And institutes such as PICG, UN Women, we're here to support that transition and move towards the gender equality and women's empowerment agenda. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, PSX.